Hi everyone, it's Dr. Z. Welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. In today's episode, we are going to break down 5 common myths that people have about narcissistic abuse, and we're going to set the record straight. Hi everyone, it's Dr. Z, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we are talking about 5 major myths of narcissistic personality disorder. These myths are things that I see routinely on social media, and they're the ones that get the comments that start arguments. And so I really want to tackle these and address these so that I can set the record straight for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with what's a myth and what's fact, because there's a lot of bad information out there. And the reason why it's important to know what the myths are about narcissistic abuse and narcissistic personality disorder is so that we can formulate healthy, effective, boundaried responses. Because if we don't understand what's accurate or not with narcissistic personality disorder, it doesn't give us the opportunity to come up with kind of really effective strategies and ways to respond in these types of situations. So let's start with number 1. And this is the one that I see most often, that I kind of, my blood boils when I see this because people get it wrong all the time. The myth that narcissists routinely go for those who are weak, who have no backbone, who are, kind of quote doormats, right? And that are like these extreme people pleasers. Now, understand, nothing is 100%. I'm not saying narcissists don't go for people pleasers. Narcissists don't care who they go for. That's the thing. A narcissist has no preference. A narcissist is going to go for anyone and anything that gives them supply. Period. Doesn't matter. So that idea that narcissists go for people who won't give them a hard time, who will cater to them, isn't really true. Now, here's what happens, and I think this is where the confusion comes in. I will say that narcissists, while they will go for anybody, they are more drawn, believe it or not, to people who are successful, strong-willed, strong-minded, confident, attractive, smart, all of that. And I know you're probably thinking, why would they do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. First, it looks good for them to stand next to somebody or work with somebody or be friends with somebody who is well known in the community, who is intelligent, who's successful, who's wealthy, who is very well liked, very well respected, who has the limelight on them. It makes the narcissist look good. They want what you have. And so they're drawn to that. They view you as good in the beginning, right? Until you blink wrong or speak the wrong word, and now all of a sudden you're bad, right? Because they put you on this pedestal, you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're perfect, and then you can't live up to those unrealistic expectations, and then all of a sudden you're bad and terrible. And then, that's kind of the flow of things, right? We know this. So let's use intimate relationships just for the sake of the conversation, but narcissists routinely are attracted to these types of people. Here's the other reason why, though. It's not just to make them look good. And this reason is the one, I say this all the time. I've been doing this a really long time. And every now and then, I'm used to hearing the stories and the things that happen, right? And they fit the blueprint and all that. But I'd be lying if I told you that, this just happened the other day when I was working with a patient. They told me something that happened. And just when you think you've heard it all, you're just kind of like, oh my God, like that's really just evil. And it just goes to show you that, even working in this field, I still get shocked by the behavior that I hear sometimes. This is one of those things. It still just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The other reason why narcissists go for successful, attractive, wealthy, it doesn't have to be all of these, but it's kind of that image of somebody, somebody who is strong-minded, strong-willed, really kind of knows what they want in life. The reason why that is so appealing to a narcissist is because the goal of a narcissist, one of them, is to totally break you down, strip you of your identity, and make you a shell of your former self. That's their goal. That's how they gain the most supply. And then when there's nothing left of you, as far as your sense of self and identity, I mean, it's still there, but it's very buried. When it is no longer visible, then they get no supply from you. They discard you, and they go find somebody else. So why do you think it is that a narcissist would gravitate towards somebody who is really successful and smart and all of those things? And the reason for that is because there's significant room to knock you down. So if they gravitate towards somebody in a relationship who has very low self-esteem, who is, really down on themselves, no sense of self-identity, or at least a really weak one, there's not that much supply to get from them. But if you are all of those things I said before, now you got a further way to fall when they knock you down, which translates into a hell of a lot more supply for the narcissist. And, even just saying this out loud, again, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because it is so, it's just so evil. I don't know how else to say it. So that's why it's a myth that narcissists go for weak people. Here, I think, is where the confusion comes in. Let's say you are one of these successful, strong-minded, strong-willed people, and you get love bombed like hell in the beginning of the relationship. You get sucked in, and you don't even realize what's happening because it's insidious. It's slow. You don't realize it. I always say it's the trickle of the faucet until you realize one day, like, shit, I'm standing in the middle of my kitchen and there's water all around me and I can't breathe because I am drowning. Let's say that's your situation. What happens, and what the goal is of the narcissist, is to slowly and in a very subtle manner that you can't quite call them out on, the gaslighting begins, right? The insults begin in a very subtle way. Like, oh, I like you better without makeup. Why do you put all that stuff on your face? Or, those jeans, I don't like them on you that much. I don't know. They don't look good. Or, your friend Sandra? I use her name. That's my best friend. I always throw her name in just because. Why not? Your best friend Sandra? I know you're really good friends with her, but I never understood how you got along so well with her. There's just something about her that I don't trust. I'm surprised you trust her. See what they're doing, right? They start to make you doubt yourself, right? They start to make you question yourself. And because they have presented themselves to you in such an amazing, loving light, like, why wouldn't you trust them? Maybe they see something you don't. Maybe you missed it. Maybe you missed cues. And they understand why you missed cues, because at some point you told them how you had a really bad relationship with your dad, or you had a really bad relationship with your mom. And so they may say, and you told them this in confidence because you trusted them and you shared stories and they relate to you. And so they may say, but I understand why you gravitated towards her. I understand why you really like Sandra, because it seems like she reminds you of your mom a little bit. So I get it. And now what's happened is you're sitting there going, oh, shit. I didn't think of it like that. One, because it's not true. But They use these vulnerabilities against you to start to discredit your thinking, to start to make you think you cannot trust your decisions. And so what that does to a very strong-minded, very secure person is it becomes really jarring because you've never looked at yourself like that. You've always trusted your instincts because you're fully capable of it. But they slowly start to make you feel incapable by masking it as helpful little nuggets about how they're going to make you a better person, a stronger person, when in reality, they're slowly starting to knock you down. And again, if you started really confident and successful, you got a long way to go. And that's a lot of supply for the narcissist. So again, it is a myth that narcissists go for weak people. What happens in the course of a narcissistic relationship, narcissistic abuse, is that once very strong-minded, very independent person gradually becomes very insecure, lacking self-identity, right? Lacking self-esteem, not knowing what their opinions are because they've lost them, not trusting their instincts, not trusting their own thoughts. So it ends up looking like the person has low self-esteem and, doesn't have a backbone. But really what it is that, again, over time, they have been stripped of this. And I cannot tell you how many people I have worked with who all say the same thing, that at the end of this relationship, after everything they've been through, they feel like a shell of their former self. So to the outside world, yeah, it's going to look like the narcissist goes for people who are, low in self-esteem, but that's not the case. And, again, why is this important? Because I think people believe that if they are strong-willed and strong-minded and smart and successful, that this can't happen to them. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I look at this as preventative medicine. I'm kind of talking about these myths because I see wrong information all the time, especially on social media. And I need to, for myself and for everyone listening, kind of set the record straight because it's dangerous if you don't know. Okay, so that's the first myth. Check that off. Second myth. The myth that narcissists cannot control their rage and that they can't control their anger. Okay. Are there people that can't control their anger, that they just kind of snap and see red? Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Right. Particularly when substance abuse is involved, or for whatever reason. And they just fly off the handle. And it takes a lot of work to get them to be mindful in the moment, aware of what their triggers are, to get them to stop. And again, here's my whole function of behavior. The function of somebody who flies off the handle, right, may be something triggered them that they were unaware of, or maybe they were aware of and their anger just exploded. Is it right? No, absolutely 100% not. The difference is they don't want to be like that. They don't want to explode. They don't want to argue with people. They know that there's consequences to that and they don't want to hurt people. So they work on it. They have empathy. They have remorse. That's not a narcissist. So can narcissists not control their anger? Narcissists are extremely skilled at controlling their anger and controlling their outbursts. And I know there's people listening saying they're absolutely not. The narcissist that I was with, they would routinely fly off the handle. Here's the thing. A narcissist uses their anger as a manipulative strategy. They are very much aware of when they're angry, how they get angry, and to whom they're going to be angry at. And there is always an underlying motive and function for when they, quote, lose their cool. Okay? And here's why a narcissist is extremely skilled at controlling their anger. If you have been in a situation with a narcissist, you will understand what I'm talking about. You could be out to dinner, having a great time. You get in the car with someone who's a narcissist, and they absolutely flip out on you, screaming at you, demeaning you, condescending, horrible, hateful comments, yelling, punching the steering wheel. But they held it together at the restaurant. And I know some of you are saying, okay, well, maybe they didn't want to lose their cool in front of people at the restaurant. Maybe. But then you get back to your house, and let's say your in-laws are there babysitting your kids. Walk into the house, turns it right back on. Oh, hey, how are you? Thank you so much for watching our kids. That was really sweet of you. We'll see you next week. In-laws leave the house, rage starts up again. Extremely common. So tell me, somebody who is not able to control their anger would never be able to do that. They wouldn't. They wouldn't be able to turn it down. They wouldn't be able to dial it back. They wouldn't have the cognitive or behavioral skills or strategies to be able to do that. Now, a narcissist will use that rage and that anger to manipulate situations. Okay. So, for example, let's say that, you got invited to a birthday party for one of your friends. And you know that if you go, your significant other is going to freak out because they're extremely controlling of who you go out with, and they don't want you going out without them. Fine. So that fear of them flipping out is exactly what I'm talking about. They use that to control your behaviors. Okay? They use that fear you have of their freakouts to dictate what you can and can't do, how you can and can't feel, how you can and can't think. Because if you're so scared of them freaking out, which, don't get me wrong, is extremely scary, dangerous, and scary. And so to prevent that from happening, you don't go out with your friends. And slowly your world starts to shrink. And that is exactly the goal of a narcissist. And they will use that against you to control you all the time. Another example. You could cook them dinner one night and it's their favorite dinner and they adore you for it. Next week, because you got that kindness, that faux kindness from them, the faux loving behaviors from them, you cook them again, that same meal again a week later. But this time for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Now they flip out and throw the plate against the wall, telling you you're a horrible cook. How dare you? They worked all day and this is what they come home to. You're a crappy spouse. Notice I'm not saying male or female. I'm doing that on purpose because narcissists are not just men, which is kind of another myth too, that females aren't really as narcissistic, and it could not be further from the truth, but that'll be a different episode. But I always get yelled at for only talking about men, but then when you really go back and listen, I don't. I watch my words very carefully with this. People just assume it's women, so it's interesting. Or assume it's men, so it's quite interesting. Anyway, so they throw the plate against the wall and they're flipping out on you, and there's no rhyme or reason for this, right? There's absolutely no reason. And because of that inconsistency, it's a means to control you, to keep you walking on eggshells, because you never know when that rage is going to show up. Now, let's say they throw the plate against where they completely flip out on you for zero reason. And then the phone rings. They pick up their cell phone. Hey, Jamie, what's up? How are you? Yeah, everything's great. What's going on? As literally a second before that, they were throwing a plate against the wall, screaming at the top of their lungs how you're a terrible human being, only to pick up the phone seconds later as if nothing's wrong. So again, you tell me, is that the behavior of somebody who can't control their anger? Or is that the behavior of somebody who is so unbelievably skilled and manipulative and purposeful? So yes. So myth number 2, checking it off. Myth number 3. And this is the one that causes the most chaos on social media comments. I cannot tell you how many DMs I've gotten, how many nasty comments I've gotten telling me that how horrible of a psychologist I am because I am stigmatizing those with narcissistic personality disorder. And all I'm doing is reporting the symptoms. That's it. I'm just reporting behaviors. So you'll never hear me say, whether I think this or not is irrelevant. You'll never hear me say they are bad people. I will say their behaviors are bad. You'll never hear me say they're evil. I'll say it's evil in terms of the behaviors. So just putting that out there for what it's worth. Anyway, myth number 3. This one is the one that pisses everybody off. The myth that narcissists don't know what they're doing. They are not aware of their behaviors, and they are not aware of the damage that it causes those around them. That is a myth. Yes, they know what they are doing. I'll repeat that. Yes, they know what they are doing. Let me give a little caveat here in a second. The reason why this one is so unbelievably hard to grasp, and I understand why, and I do this for a living and I still understand why. Because somebody who's not a narcissist can't wrap their brain around or fathom that the abuse that they have endured was purposeful. That the damage that has been done to their lives, to their livelihood, the emotional abuse, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the financial abuse, all of it, the abuse to their children, the calculated behaviors, the really kind of just evil behaviors was done with purpose, intent, and full awareness. And listen, I understand why this is so unbelievably hard to grasp. It would also feel much better if all of those things that were done were not done with intent. We're not done with a deliberate function to them, which is power, manipulation, and control. We talk about this all the time. So here's why they know what they're doing. Well, the example I gave before, the ability to turn it on and off like that. For those not watching on YouTube, for those listening, here, I'm going to snap extra for you. Here's the thing. They know what they're doing. They don't care if they hurt you. They don't care about the damage that they've caused. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Their intention necessarily isn't always to harm you. And I think this is where people get confused. Sometimes in situations, not all the times, but sometimes with narcissists, they will engage in certain behaviors to ensure that they get what they want in any given situation, whatever it takes to get their needs met. If you happen to be in the way, well, that's your fault. You're a casualty of war. You're a consequence. You're like a, it's the equivalent of Let me think of a good example of watching a baseball game and you happen to be sitting in row 3, seat 20, and somebody hits a foul ball and it knocks you in the head. They are going to do whatever the hell they need to do to get to home base. And if you happen to be sitting in that seat and get hit in the head, well, that's your fault for sitting in the seat. They won't issue an apology. No, a baseball player will probably feel extremely bad and guilty and horrible and apologize and give them the ball and say they're sorry and have empathy and remorse. A total accident. Whereas a narcissist will say, well, it's your damn fault for being in the way. I'm not apologizing. I didn't do anything wrong. So sometimes it's a situation like that. Did they intentionally hit you with the ball? No. Do they give a shit that they hit you with the ball? No. So that's why sometimes I think people assume that narcissists don't know what they're doing. But that's just one example. But don't get me wrong. Majority of the time, the narcissist knows damn well what they're doing because everything they do has a motive. Nothing is by chance. Nothing is just coincidence. It doesn't work like that. There's a motive. And it's usually in the context of getting what they need, gaining control, gaining power. And they're going to do whatever they need to do. And they don't care if, as a result of that, you get harmed. They don't care if their children get harmed. And we'll talk about narcissistic parents in another episode, probably in another couple episodes, because it's a big topic. So yeah, they know what they're doing. They know. Again, here's another example. When in the beginning of a relationship, an intimate relationship, when they are love bombing you, when they are getting into really deep conversations with you to get your vulnerabilities out of you and aligning with you, saying, oh my God, I totally understand that. My mother was the same way. Or, oh my God, I can't believe you had that experience too. That's how I feel. That's how I was raised. The chances are they weren't. But they're going to say that because it makes you feel heard. It makes you feel understood. And so you're more likely to give them more information. They don't give a shit about what happens in your life. The only reason they're doing that, and the only reason it appears that they care, is because they want all your vulnerabilities. So at some point down the road, they can hold them against you. They can use it to control you. They know exactly what they're doing. There's a game plan. There's a blueprint, which again is for another episode, the blueprint of narcissistic behavior. But yeah, bottom line, they know what they're doing. Again, I understand why this is so unbelievably hard to wrap your brain around, because this is not how we operate. And I think also, in treating people, I think the fact that this realization that a lot of my patients have that, after 40 years, 4 years, 4 months, that the narcissistic parent, friend, partner, whoever knew what they were doing, that realization is extremely jarring and traumatic for people. That like really hits home. And it's one of the most, from a psychologist standpoint, is really one of those moments in therapy where my heart absolutely breaks for them, because it's in that moment they realize that they were an object, they were used, and because they put in so much effort, had so many tears, had so much heartbreak, had so much pain, only to realize that it was deliberate and that it was known that they were hurting and it didn't matter. It's a really jarring experience for people. So if you're listening and you feel that way, you are not alone. And as a psychologist, I can tell you, it really breaks my heart. It's probably one of the hardest kind of parts in that course of therapy, for me at least, to work with people, from just a human standpoint. Okay, number 4 myth, and I get yelled at for this. I get yelled at a lot. 4 myth. Fourth myth, that if they just addressed their traumas in therapy, that they would be better. And there's so much wrong with this statement. Number one, I'm not going to say never because crazy things happen. Aliens could land tomorrow. Pigs could fly. Could happen. So I'm never going to say never. But, and there was an eclipse lately, so, anything's possible. I'm going to say pretty damn close to 99%, maybe 98%. I'll put 2% in there in case aliens come. But narcissists will not change, at least to the extent that they're able to maintain meaningful change where it will make an impact in your relationship. Again, I'm going to repeat that. There is a very tiny chance that somebody with narcissistic personality disorder is going to willingly make long-term, sustainable, meaningful change. I don't care how good of a psychologist, therapist you are. A narcissist must be willing to change, which means they must have empathy and remorse for those that they are harming by their behavior. And that's not going to happen. And again, I get yelled at all the time. How I'm stigmatizing mental health, how I'm giving up on the narcissist. How can I say that? How can, these are people who are traumatized from their upbringing too. And you know what? Yes, they are. But so are a lot of other people. Many people. And the issue with narcissistic personality disorder is one, they don't present for treatment unless it's court mandated for something or some custody related thing where they're trying to manipulate the family courts for another episode. So they go to therapy and they charm the therapist, and they're never going because they feel guilty about their behaviors. They may go because they're losing their job and they're depressed because their world is crumbling around them. But as soon as they start to feel a tiny bit, they're out. They're not going because of their behaviors. They may go for a hot second because of all the things happening to them. Everything happens to them. They're the victim. But they don't stay in therapy. I've had people, who, if I'm working with the other person, right, the one who's being abused, they'll either try to charm me or they'll flat out get up, curse me out, walk out of my office. They'll try to be condescending. But once they realize that, I'm going to set a boundary and I'm not going to take their crap, they hate me. Now I'm bad. Now I'm horrible. So, as soon as you start to crack into their vulnerabilities, they're going to either, really fight back. They're not going to show up again. They're going to think you're terrible and stupid, and they're not going to that therapist anymore. They're not going to stay in therapy long enough to make meaningful change. Again, I'm going to say 98%. Aliens could land tomorrow. But it is extremely unlikely. So if you are waiting for the narcissist to make meaningful change where it's going to have a significant impact in your relationship, where the relationship's going to improve, you're going to be waiting forever. And I will say that much. And again, this is where couples therapy comes in with a narcissist, which for so many reasons I do not recommend, which I'll get to another time. But here's something that I got that I use as an example routinely because it really pissed me off. So understand that as a psychologist, my primary goal, not just in work, in life, with my kids, with whoever, my primary goal is to help people live fulfilled, productive lives. Okay. So for me as a psychologist, to say that someone can't change goes against everything I've been taught, everything I believe in, and everything I know, right? It just goes against the grain. It's not how we're trained. It's not who I am. So for me to say with 98% certainty, aliens, that somebody is not going to change is so unbelievably difficult for me to actually say. And it took me a really long time as a psychologist to be able to say that, because it's a really difficult statement to make, and it's a bold statement to make. I get such shit for this. So I need you to understand how difficult it is for me to actually say that as a psychologist. So this is the thing that really pissed me off. And then we'll move on to the fifth one. Somebody said to me once in a comment on Instagram how I'm stigmatizing somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, how it's terrible that as a psychologist I'm saying this, and that narcissists are wounded human beings too, and that they should be treated as such. I'm not disagreeing that they're not, quote, wounded. Majority of them have had trauma, intergenerational trauma, but so many of us have too, okay? So I'm not saying they don't have trauma. They do. It's not their fault that they had the upbringing that they did. It is their responsibility to not carry that into adulthood. And that's where narcissism kind of separates. I am not going to say to my female patients who come into my office and tell me that for the last 30 years of their marriage, they have been raped repeatedly. They have been coerced into horrible situations out of fear of abuse, fear of being harmed, fear of being killed. I'm not going to tell somebody who's telling me that they were raped last night by their spouse, by their significant other, that, oh, you know what? I know that really sucks, but they're a wounded human being too. They can't help what they do. They need help. Are you kidding me? I saw that comment, and I rarely comment back on things like that because I just let them go, because it's just, I educate enough on there that if they really wanted to learn, they would look at the things that I post. Oh, but this one pissed me off. I lost it and posted a reel about this. I am not going to tell my female patient, male patient, whoever, child who was sexually abused, that I know it was really rough what you went through. I'm sorry you were raped, but they're a wounded human being and they should be treated as such. Get out of here. No. And my Philly accent just came out. Did you hear that? Not going to happen. Sorry. Not sorry. So that's okay. So let's move on to number 5, because I could talk about that for hours. Okay. So the last myth I'm going to talk about is that they are only like this with you, that somehow you're doing something that prolongs it, enables it. They're going to be different with somebody else because they're going to learn from their mistakes. They're not going to be any different with anybody else. In the beginning of a new relationship, you may see them posting all over social media, going on vacations, all these things, but it's no different than what they did with you. They're just in the love bombing stage. And you may, because you're, had been discarded and abused for so long, you may have you have lost perspective on the pattern of behavior and the cycle of narcissistic abuse. So you see them doing this with other people, this love bombing, and you're like, oh my God, they've changed. They really love this person. They're going to be different with them. It was my fault. It was something I did. I should have left, or I should have done X, Y, and Z differently, or I'm the reason they didn't love me. I'm the reason that they were abusive. Massive myth. They're not going to be different with anybody else. They're going to follow the same damn cycle, the same pattern over and over and over again. The myth is that you're responsible. That's the myth. Because let me tell you something. You are in no way, shape, or form responsible. And when people say, all right, well, if it was that bad, they should have left, right? Or, by staying, they enabled the behavior. Here's the thing. You tell me what you would do if you were told that if you leave, I'll kill you. If you leave, I'm going to take full custody of our kids and you'll never see them. And again, at this point in the relationship, you're not this secure, independent person that's able to look at them and say, yeah, try me. By this point in the relationship, you are so broken down You are so lost that fear, that belief you have that they're going to take your kids away, that belief you have that they're going to kill you, there's no way for you to differentiate fact from fiction. And so you stay because you're scared to death. That is not enabling. That is not the reason why they're doing what they're doing. The result of, but it's not the reason, and it is not your fault. So the myth that you in some way enable this behavior and they'll be different with someone else and they would have been different with you if you just had done X, Y, and Z. Nope, because they would have manipulated that situation too. There is literally nothing you could have done to make it different. Nothing. The fact that you got out, that's the best thing you could have done. Or, and the reason why I'm doing this, like preventative medicine, is to know the signs early on so that you don't get into this. Or you get into it and then you realize early enough and you're able to step out of it. So those are the 5 myths. I hope that was helpful. I know this was a lot of information, but it's so important to understand these myths because you can see if you don't understand them, your responses to narcissistic behavior is really going to continue to just keep you stuck. And it's so important to be able to separate yourself from the myths and separate yourself from the unhealthy patterns so that you can see objectively what you need to do to remove yourself from the situation. So that's it. And I hope that was helpful. And I will see all of you next time on Next Up Narcissism.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign-up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.